We're men, manly men, we're men in tights. Yes! And that's all you're getting from my angelic voice. La 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 la. Let's just roll the titles. Hello everyone and welcome to another Rewind review. I thought I'd do something a little bit lighter this week, so what it is that we're going to be doing in this video is taking a look at a true comedy classic. And that movie is Robin Hood, Men in Tights. Co-written by Evan Chandler, J.D. Shapiro and Mel Brooks, who also directs. The 1993 movie is a spoof of Robin Hood in general, and in particular Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and stars Cary Elwes, Richard Lewis, Roger Rees, Amy Yazbek, Mark Blankfield, Dave Chappelle, Isaac Hayes, Megan Cavanagh, Eric Allen Kramer, Matthew Peretta, Tracy Ullman, Mel Brooks, Dom DeLuise, Dick Van Patten, Robert Ridgely and Patrick Stewart. Mel Brooks is one of the most well-known comedy directors, and some of his movies often rank as some of the greatest comedies ever made, and not without their fair share of controversies. Now when it comes to my experience with Mel Brooks movies, I haven't seen every single one that he's ever made, like The History of the World Part 1 and 2, but I have seen a good number of them. And while they aren't all good, his best ones are among my favourite comedies of all time. And all of them seem to involve Gene Wilder. When it comes to this movie, this is one of the more recent ones that I've seen. Not recent as in like the past year or so, I mean like it was a couple of years ago when I first saw this one. I only really knew about this one through my mum, who had mentioned it a few times, plus I kept hearing how funny it was from some other people too. I have seen a good amount of different interpretations of Robin Hood over the years, from movies and TV shows, animated movie and things like that, but I've never seen a full-on comedy. Well, at least to my knowledge. There was a time that we very nearly got one starring Laurel and Hardy, and I would have loved to have seen it, but unfortunately that never happened. So I was very curious what this movie would be like, especially with Mel Brooks' style of comedy. And one Christmas someone surprised me with this as a present, so I was finally able to give it a go. And while I did enjoy it and I did have a good laugh, I will admit I was a little bit more mixed on this than I thought I'd be. And that's pretty much how I still feel about it today. Men in Tights is a full-on parody of the Legend of Robin Hood and borrows elements from several different interpretations of the story, including and especially Prince of Thieves, which released 2 years earlier with Alan Rickman as the Sheriff and Kevin Costner as Robin Hood. I still to this day don't understand why they didn't get a Brit to play Robin Hood in that movie, or get Kevin Costner a better dialect coach. To be fair, they actually do address it in this movie, and it is by far my favourite joke of the entire film. And why should the people listen to you? Because, unlike some other Robin Hoods, I can speak with an English accent. It's still accurate to this day. Anyway, the story that this interpretation follows sees Robin Hood returning to England by swimming all the way from Jerusalem, where he finds that everything he once had is now gone, including his home, his parents, his brothers, his dog, his cat, and his goldfish Goldie, and that Prince John has assumed control of the throne while King Richard fights in the Crusades. Assembling his band of merry men, Robin sets out to regain his father's land, defeat the Sheriff of Rottingham, oust Prince John from the throne, and win the heart of Maid Marian. So it is basically the traditional Robin Hood story, and it does feature a lot of the elements that most people would expect from a Robin Hood movie. And that includes the bridge fight between Little John and Robin, as well as the archery contest, but it's all done with a comedic twist. I've come to warn you, Prince John and Rottingham have hired men to kill you at the fair tomorrow. You mustn't go. Well, that's easy. I won't go. Oh, I'm so happy. They were going to try to lure you there by having an archery contest. An archery contest? It also acts as a straight-up parody of Prince of Thieves, with several plot points, costumes and more taken directly from it. So I do think that if you want to get the full experience of this movie and you want to understand a lot of the references, I do think that you need to see Prince of Thieves before you watch this. But as for the comedy in general, it is pretty good and it is mostly funny. It definitely has that Mel Brooks style and flair and mixes in a great amount of verbal and visual gags, some of which you might not catch on just the one viewing. But this is a film that does prioritise getting a laugh over being subtle, and it can be very over the top and daft. You know, go big or go home. So I do think that the comedy won't be for everyone. I will admit, and this could purely be because I have seen this a few times, I didn't find it as funny as I remembered it being when I rewatched it for this video. The jokes when I rewatched this movie were a bit 50-50 for me, but what does work in this movie is genuinely good, with some really good gags and some very memorable lines. They do nick one joke from Bugs Bunny involving a glove, but it is still funny. Some of my favourite jokes in this movie are the fourth wall breaks and the self-awareness, either just from the characters winking at the camera when something gets referenced, or just straight up having one of the characters pulling out a copy of the script because they don't know what's happening. I did enjoy that. Now, I do need to say, and I do kind of need to warn, This is a movie that came out in the 90s, and it does feature a lot of jokes that are a bit dated and might not really be for the most sensitive of viewers. So I do think that if you are likely to be offended, I'm not sure if this is going to be the movie for you. And you definitely don't want to watch Blazing Saddles either, which this movie does actually reference in a really fun way. Actually, that's worth mentioning. This is a movie that does make a lot of pop culture references, and this is absolutely one of the reasons why some of the jokes can feel dated. Because there's a load of things that get referenced or joked about that for people today, and I'll kind of throw myself in here as well. There are things in this movie that I have no knowledge of or only know a tiny bit about. Prime example being the pumped up shoes that a Chew wears. Now, I only know what they are through Austin Powers, which is a bit random to be honest, but that's because it's the only other time that I've seen them before and I have no knowledge of the marketing or what the deal is with the pumped up thing. They're admittedly a bit before my time. They do acknowledge a few things from around the time period too, some really funny jokes and references to that era with a modern twist that highlights how odd and strange some things were back then. Not all of them are funny, and I'll admit there are a few running gags in this movie that made me a tad uncomfortable when I watched this with family members. Things like the chastity belt as well as the introduction of circumcisions. I genuinely do not know how this movie is a PG, but they do have fun with it and they really lean into the absurdity of the times. As I said, this is a 90s movie. It is very much a 90s movie and it is a product of its time. Complete with 90s rap music too. I really don't know why. But it is still entertaining overall, and I do think that if you have never seen this movie before, I do think that you will have a good time with it. I'll tell you who else is having a good time, and that's the cast. The cast is a mixture of actors that have and haven't worked with Mel Brooks before, and overall, I think everyone does a pretty solid job. Cary Elwes leads the show as Robin of Loxley, and he is just excellent. He really does capture the cockiness and presence of Robin Hood really well, and he gets to kind of act like the straight man when all the others start joking. But the comedy that he gets to work with makes him a proper standout, which is quite rare for a main character. Robin Hood can be an idiot in this movie at times, and he does think he is much better at everything than he actually is. Plus, the performance from Cary Elwes, from his training, his physicality, especially the way he fights with swords, his speeches, including one where he randomly becomes Winston Churchill, and those cartoonish over-the-top expressions and deliveries makes him a brilliant comedic actor, and by far one of the most memorable interpretations of this character. Cary is perfect in this movie and I love what he's done here. I believe he does play quite a similar character in The Princess Bride, which I'll admit is a movie that I haven't actually seen. I heard that gasp from here. I do want to see it, and if that similarity is genuinely the case, then I am really looking forward to seeing what it is that he gets up to in it. Now, every Robin Hood needs a sheriff, and in this movie we have Roger Rees playing the Sheriff of Rottingham. He's a very over-the-top character and constantly gets humiliated by Robin, and my God, he's fun to watch. He really hams things up in a fun way, and he's got a good amount of screen time. I love, and I'm slightly confused by him mixing up his sentences in a proper tongue twister fashion. I don't get the reason behind the gag, to be honest, but I do think that it is funny. King, illegal, forest, 2 pig wild kill, in it is. What? I mean, don't you know it is illegal to kill a wild pig in the King's Forest? He's also got to be able to stand on his own in contrast to Robin Hood, and I don't think that either of them overshadow each other. They both get some great moments. I like how the rivalry is handled in a much lighter and daft way, and I do think that Roger is a load of fun as the sheriff. I really do like the cast overall, with Amy Yazbek playing Maid Marian, Richard Lewis playing Prince John with his constantly moving mole. I have a mole. We also get a small cameo from Mel Brooks himself as Rabbi Tuckman. Plus, and I was quite surprised by this, Tracy Ullman as the King's advisor, Latrine. I am definitely not going to tell you what the character's family name used to be. Plus, it even features a small cameo from Patrick Stewart, sporting a slightly odd Scottish accent. And as far as I know, the reason behind the accent is because it's meant to be a spoof of Sean Connery's appearance in Prince of Thieves as King Richard. Again, you could do with seeing that movie in order to understand a lot of the jokes in this. But of course, what would Robin Hood be without his merry men? And in this version, there's a really entertaining bunch of characters. cast, with people such as Eric Allen Kramer playing Little John, Mark Blankfield as Blinken, Dave Chappelle as Achu, and Matthew Peretta as Will Scarlett O'Hara. I really do enjoy what they do with these characters, with each having their own quirks and personalities that both bounce off and clash with each other. I don't think they all get too much to do, but everyone in this movie is clearly having an absolute blast. They are so much fun to watch, they're really entertaining, and as for the Merry Men themselves, they get the best songs. It is a Mel Brooks movie after all, so there is an emphasis on music, and there's a number of various songs that are dotted throughout this movie, most of which were written by Mel Brooks himself. Some of the songs in this are very 90s, with a couple of rap songs at the beginning and end, which is fine, but then there's others where it just becomes a full-on musical with proper and pretty well choreographed dance sequences. They're so good! So good in fact that I genuinely think that they could turn this movie into a full-on Broadway musical. And after all, why not? It works for the producers and Young Frankenstein. I do quite like the songs in this. They are funny, they fit the movie, and they are used really well. The soundtrack in general is pretty good, with a score composed by Humming Man. That can't be his real name. It definitely has the right kind of vibe for this movie, and it features a really swashbuckling theme that really suits Robin Hood. And that's actually pretty similar to what I think about the costumes and the overall production design. This genuinely does look, feel, and sound like a proper Robin Hood movie. It feels big, with a decent amount of action and adventure. And even though this is a comedy first and foremost, it does feel like the real thing, with a very old school approach. I dare say that if you showed someone pictures or played them the music, they would be convinced that this is from an actual serious movie about this character. Not necessarily a recent one, but the point still stands. The music is great, the costumes that they use, which kind of blurs together the different eras of Robin Hood movies, are also great. And I love the location that they chose to be Sherwood Forest and how they bring the kingdom to life. Overall, this is a very entertaining, fun, light-hearted and humorous comedy. There's a great cast with good costumes, set design and music. The story is pretty light and follows the traditional Robin Hood story, but it is short and doesn't get distracted from ever being anything more than a straight-up comedy. The comedy itself, as I said, can be 50-50 and not everything will hit, but the stuff that does work is very funny and very memorable. That being said, as this is a spoof of the legend and more so Prince of Thieves, I do think that you will need to have some knowledge of this character or have seen a number of other things to get a better experience from this. As a Mel Brooks film, it is pretty decent and I do think that fans will enjoy this. I really enjoy it overall, but as I said, I do remember it being a lot funnier the first time that I saw this. It's not the best movie that Mel Brooks has ever made, but it is certainly not his worst, and I would encourage people to give this one a look. My advice to you guys, watch this with friends. So with all that being said, my rating for Robin Hood Men in Tights is a 7 out of 10. I'm actually surprised to find out that this isn't actually the first time that Mel Brooks has ever done anything Robin Hood related, and I have literally only just found this out yesterday. It turns out that there was a TV series released in 1975 called When Things Were Rotten, and originally it was written up in the style of one of Mel Brooks' movies, and apparently the creators of the show reached out to Mel Brooks to get his input, and not only did he suggest one of the actors who should be in it, he also went on to write one of the episodes. So I think he liked it. Other than that, I don't really know anything else about the show, but I am kind of curious to see what the show was like, so maybe I'll give it a watch one day. We'll see. Well, I think that is pretty much everything I want to say for this video, so if you have watched this video, thank you very much for watching, and as always, if you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the notification button to keep up to date on everything that's going on here. Also, keep an eye on the community section of the YouTube page, as I do tend to post a lot of my updates there. I know there's been a bit of a delay with a lot of these videos getting released, and I do apologise, but life happens, or in my case, a trapped nerve. Believe me, it is not fun. I could barely walk. But I am feeling much better now, so hopefully I will be able to get back on track with these videos. Especially one of the upcoming Rewind reviews, which is a movie that I've been wanting to talk about nearly all year. So keep an eye out for that. And also, I am open to suggestions. If you guys do have any suggestions for any future Rewind reviews you would like me to do, let me know down in the comments. And also, if you have seen Robin Hood Men in Tights, let me know down in the comments what you think of it. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Rewind Reviews. See you guys.